여러분 아시나요? Do you know the taste of Korea? 그렇다면 이 음식이 어디 나라 음식인지 한국과 세계 음식을 소개하고 알아보는 시간 매튜님과 함께하는 맛대 맛! 안녕하세요.
Hello, hello.
How are you doing?
Good. I like the name of the segment, Matt on Matt.
Yeah.
I'll look at it that way.
There you go. 맛대 맛. Well, in any case, today we are talking over a pretty broad subject.
Yeah, might be even the broadest.
But that's why it's more difficult.
Right.
그러니까 더 어려운 것 같아요. So we're talking about bread. And I thought, okay, well, anything to do with bread, we can take Asia out of the equation. 근데 생각해보면 인도는 뭐예요?
Right.
중국도 호빵 같은 거 굉장히 좋아하는데.
When you really start to think about it, there are so many things are bread.
Yeah, and so what is bread?
What is bread?
Could be desserts?
Right?
아침
Everything.
식사?
You can find a bread that's appropriate for any time of the day.
Yeah.
Anywhere in the world.
Right.
It can be made out of almost anything.
Is
we'll
cake
find.
bread?
I would argue that it is. I
Okay.
think there are some people who are like very passionate about this, but I vehemently will argue that cake is bread.
Okay.
I'm also one of those people who thinks that a hot dog is a sandwich.
Well, I mean, it's meat in between two buns.
Right? I mean, if like it's not. I mean, it's like it's anything in between two
open.
pieces of what is bread. We'll find out today, I guess.
All right. Well, it's time to take a look at our question. 과연 어떤 질문인지 어떤 내용인지 함께 알아보죠. All right. The question of the day is.
So, as you know, 빵 같은 반죽 같은 거 만들면은 발효해야 되잖아요. When you
그죠.
make like a dough or a batter, you usually have to ferment it or some kind of proofing. But which country has a traditional bread whose main ingredient is fermented for up to 2 years?
와. 빵을 만드는데 가장 중요한 재료를 최대 2년 동안 발효하여 전통빵을 만드는 나라가 있답니다. 이 나라는 과연 어디일까요?
Right. So for anyone who listening who has never baked before, 2 years is a very long time.
Very long.
Yeah, if you think about it, like kimchi only takes takes a few
Couple
days up
weeks,
to a
maybe?
couple of weeks,
Yeah.
and so up to 2 years. This is very, very unusually long to ferment the main ingredient.
Okay, but I do think that there are like when people say, starters. 요즘 코로나 때 sourdough bread가 굉장히 붐이었잖아요. 그래서 그걸 이제 시작하려면 이 starter라는 키트가 있어요. 그걸 계속 do you have to put sugar?
Flour.
Or is it just flour?
You feed it with more flour and water.
먹여주고 막 그러는데 그걸 발효시키는데 뭐 일주일 걸릴 수도 있고 2주 걸릴 수도 있고 it could be years as well.
Yeah, there are some starters who have been passed down from generation to generation. There are some bakeries who say that this is a starter, a levain that's been around since for centuries. I'll give you a little bit more background on this. So not only is it fermented, it's buried in the ground.
Yo.
Minimum 3 months, up to 2 years. And
Then
they
I
say
feel
the longer
like
the better.
It's Asia. Only Asians put stuff under the ground. Don't you think? I don't know. My first guess was like somewhere in Europe. It's got to be like France or Italy, even Germany. They love buns.
Sure.
But who knows? But let's get started with defining what bread is.
Right. So instead of, I guess, looking globally and broad, let's try to narrow it down. What is bread in Korea? I have a definition for you here. Why don't you read it out for me?
빵은 밀가루를 주원료로 하여 물을 섞어 발효시킨 뒤 오븐에서 구워낸 것을 지칭합니다. Aha. So this kind of says if it's baked in the oven.
Right. So not just oven. So there's oven there. We have 밀가루.
밀가루여야 되고.
Wheat flour. They specify wheat flour, and that it's mixed with water and then fermented.
Yeah.
발효시키다 to age or to ferment. So this is a very, very narrow definition, as we're about to find out.
그러면 팬케이크도 발효시키나요? 발효시킬 수도 있고.
You could, yeah. There are sourdough. You could use sourdough pancakes. Generally,
Those
no.
are so
though.
good.
Yeah, they really are.
Oh
I think they're even better if they're sourdough.
Yeah.
So let's just break down just that word itself, 빵. So here in Korea, there's 빵, and then there's also 식빵.
맞아요.
So 식빵. So the term 식 refers to meal.
Oh, does it? Oh, duh.
Meal bread.
Of course.
Right, to kind of differentiate it for a bread that you wouldn't eat for a meal.
식사, 식빵.
식빵.
Uh-huh.
So here's where things get a little complicated. So 식 means meal, but it doesn't mean meal.
밀가루의
And it doesn't
밀.
mean mil either. So the word mil in Korean means wheat, right? So
Okay.
but the English word meal itself has two definitions.
Right.
So it can mean like a meal, a time at which you eat. But it could also mean the product that you get from grinding a grain, oatmeal, cornmeal.
Oh.
And in British English speaking countries, they call whole wheat wholemeal because it's the whole meal.
Right.
You don't just take the endosperm part in, but there's the bran and all those other parts. So the term 통밀 식빵 to a British English speaker could mean wholemeal meal bread.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Whole meal, like whole wheat meal, but also like a meal
Right.
bread. Could be confusing.
It's extremely confusing. So 식빵 is differentiated because it's the meal that you might eat for a snack, for a meal rather than a snack. Because and even then, a lot of Koreans, I feel like they don't consider it like that they've eaten anything.
They don't.
Right? A lot of people do, but also a lot of older, especially older generations.
맞아요.
제대로 안 먹었다고.
맞아요. 항상 한국 친구들이랑 언니들이랑 샌드위치 샵이나 햄버거 먹어도 속이 안 차는 것 같은 느낌을 많이 이렇게 말씀을 하더라고요. 그래서 그래도 한두 시간에 막 밥도 땡기고, 금방 배 꺼진다는. Yeah.
Right. There are some people who believe that even if you have like 면, it doesn't even consider like having a meal. Like, it has to be rice. It has to be rice.
But I'm like that. If I eat noodles, it doesn't feel like. It could be a proper meal, but 금방 배가 꺼져요, 저는, with noodles. But in any case, 식빵, for me, it doesn't really translate to meal bread, but more so just the sandwich bread.
Yeah, sandwich bread. It actually specifically refers to sandwich bread because you wouldn't call baguette 식빵.
No.
You wouldn't call a sourdough loaf 식빵.
No.
It specifically refers to like a loaf of like sandwich style bread,
Right.
like a Pullman style loaf. And it doesn't even necessarily mean savory or sweet because there are like many also savory non-식빵 빵s.
You know what was like when I first came to Korea? I thought 한국 식빵이 최고인 줄 알았어요.
Sure.
Because it was so soft. When I first came, I don't know if that's when it first came out, but I was so obsessed with the 우유빵.
Right.
식빵. It was so good. And they had like the 옥수수 식빵. And then they had like figs in there and walnuts in there. And I was like, wow, this is fancy.
I do think that your average 식빵 that you can get from like a chain bakery or a grocery store here is a lot better than what you can find at other places. It's a little bit chewier. It's got a little bit more texture to it.
Yeah. Do you toast your 식빵 or 그냥 먹어요?
Sometimes I don't toast. It depends on what I'm eating. If what I'm eating, the 속 is like 말랑말랑해, then I want like a 말랑말랑한 빵. But if what I'm eating inside is very kind of robust, then like a toasted bread would go. Like I had a roommate back in college, and they were horrified when they saw that I toasted my bread for a peanut butter jelly sandwich.
Oh.
Because they were like strictly of the belief that it has to be on
Soft.
untoasted bread.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I'm very much a toast. I gotta toast my bread. 근데 I don't like peanut butter jelly, but I like just peanut butter. 근데도 단점이 뭔가를 it could be butter or peanut butter 바르면 너무 soft하니까 너무 부드러우니까 찢어지더라고요.
Sure.
That's the hardest thing. It's nothing harder than spreading like cold butter onto your piece of toast.
If you want to warm your butter up really quick, the easiest way to do it is to grate it. Put it through a cheese grater.
I saw.
Yeah.
그런 꿀팁 같은 거
Right.
봤어요.
Yeah, you want to increase the surface area.
Yeah. Here's one from our PD. Do you freeze 식빵?
100%.
You do.
I do. If my 식빵 is going to last more than like a day and a half, that's when it goes into the freezer.
I don't. 그냥 냉장고에 두거든요. But I think a lot of Koreans, to preserve their 빵, they put in the freezer.
I think 냉장고 is also okay. I think like whatever, like either refrigerator or freezer, I think you're still slowing down the staling process.
I guess so. But like I go online and I, do grocery shopping. 온라인으로 이제 장을 보면 냉동식 식빵이 그런 게 굉장히 많아요. 놀랐어요. Like, why would you do that?
It stays fresher for longer.
I guess so.
It really does.
그냥 냉장고는 굳지 않나요? 라고 PD님께서 하시는데요.
So at that point, you have to toss into the toaster.
That's why I toast it.
Yeah, so you have to
That's
toss
true.
into the toaster. If once it's the first and maybe the second day, it's great to eat. It's still fluffy and fresh, but after that, toss in the freezer.
All right, well, there you go. We're talking about 식빵 or 빵 in general. There's so much to talk about just with a loaf of bread.
Right.
But in Korea, we have plenty of other 빵 that don't really fit the dictionary definition.
Right. So 빵, it doesn't necessarily have to be just made from wheat flour. In Korea, I think probably the most common alternative you'll find is rice.
Okay.
쌀. If any guy who's gone to 군대 will know this. Just about every bread that you eat in 군대 is made from rice. So like the hamburger buns you get, the 건빵.
Right.
Because it's all made with like government subsidized rice as opposed to flour. And then you also have other types of grains that use in 빵 here. Not as common as it is in other countries. You have things like rye, 호밀.
Right.
And then like corn, 옥수수 here, but not nearly as common as you find in other countries.
PD is saying, do you know that the word 빵, it originates from a Portuguese word?
Not just Portuguese, just pretty much all of the Romance languages have the word 빵, pang. Like
there you go.
Yeah, like almost throughout the entire like Romance-speaking world, that's where that word originates from.
Yeah. So when you go to Portugal and ask for 빵, chances are they could understand.
I think so. I think that's probably the most common, I guess, like cognate between most languages is the word for bread.
Yeah. And maybe tea as well, because everyone
tea,
says
that's right.
cha.
Yeah. You're 100% correct with that.
But more diverse are the types of cooking methods for, 빵.
Right. So in our definition before, we said 오븐에서 구워낸 것. But it's not just an oven, is it? It can be steamed. You have things like 찐빵 and 술빵.
I don't like 술빵.
I feel like that's one's very divisive. I have to be in a very specific mood for 술빵.
Because I actually don't like the taste of 술.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to drink sur, the reason is to get drunk.
Yeah, and if you don't like drinking, you definitely won't like eating it.
No. Fried bread as well.
Yeah.
Donuts.
Exactly. So donuts, it's pretty much a bread dough. It's just fried instead of baked. Most of the savory fried 빵 that we have in Korea are essentially savory donuts.
Right.
So things like 야채빵 or 카레빵.
맞아요.
Then you also have griddled 붕어빵.
붕어빵 좋죠.
붕어빵. And essentially that one too, it's more technically a waffle than it is a
Right.
But we call it a 빵.
그러네요. It's exactly what a waffle is. You just have a filling inside of it.
Right, but it's called 붕어빵.
Just in the shape of a fish.
It's an incredibly broad term. I've realized this writing the script today that like 빵 is different to everybody from any culture. It's something you have to intuit once you're in that food culture. It's like how colors are different for people for different
맞아요.
color. Yeah, like what is blue to you?
파란색, like I'm just looking at your shirt right now, so I think of like denim blue.
Yeah, I think this is pretty much universally blue, but like the traffic light, is it blue or green?
그러니까 그거는 that will be just an age-old question that we will always ask. Why is it 파란불? Yeah, it just means go. Doesn't matter. And taking a look at bread just all over the world. I guess we'll take a quick song break here. That was Bread with If. 마떼마님이 이게 노래방 곡이라고 하던데요.
It is, and I was surprised that you haven't heard this one.
No,
it's a very classic, very sweet song.
Something that maybe you would sing after some 술빵. Maybe. But in any case, talking about bread, with the question being 빵을 만드는데 가장 중요한 재료를 최대 2년 동안 발효하여 전통빵을 만드는 나라가 있다고 하는데요. 이 나라는 과연 어디일까요?
That's right. Which country has a traditional bread whose main ingredient is fermented for up to 2 years?
That is incredible. So talking about what bread is, especially here in Korea, can be very different to other places around the world. So if we look on a global definition, what would it be?
So let's take a look at the broadest possible term, Wikipedia. Bread is a staple food prepared from a dough of flour, usually wheat, and water, usually by baking.
Okay.
This one is a lot less sure of itself.
Sure.
It's usually, kind of, probably
Gives you wiggle room.
It gives a lot of wiggle room.
Right. So what's the difference then between like bread and pastries? Is it just being sweeter? Because that's just the first thing that comes to my mind.
So a lot of people will argue this, and here in Korea, they're both oftentimes they're both considered bang. They don't really delineate between the two, like except for things like that are not made out of any kind of starch at all. So, for example, say like a chocolate-based pastry or like a macaron, for example.
Yeah, that's true. Because I think like pastries, you can put like tarts in.
Tarts are considered to be pastries. So most people like talk about like either how much fat there is or how much sugar there is or how much gluten is created. But there are so many exceptions if you start using any of those rules. Let's switch over from Korean and let's start talking French.
Yeah, I was thinking France is a pretty easy guess. They have so much bread.
Because not only is there so much bread, but they are so serious about their bread that they have laws about what you can call something.
Wow. 엄격한 프랑스의 빵에 대한 법률까지 있다고 하는데요.
한국에는 뭐 빵집이나 뭐 베이커리라고 부르는데 we call it a bakery or a 빵집 here in Korea.
Right.
There are 3 distinct categories in France. A patisserie, a boulangerie, and a viennoiserie.
Whoa. I think I only heard of patisserie.
Yep,
before.
Patisserie. It's pastry shop, right? Okay. Wrong. It is so much more than that.
Oh, it is.
It is actually by law. There is a very narrow definition of what a patisserie can sell.
Oh, okay. Do we know what they are?
So it basically a pastry shop in France. Patisserie both means pastry shop and pastry. It's a term that's legally controlled in France and Belgium.
Okay.
And you have to be a licensed master pastry chef in order to have.
So like 그냥 코로나 때문에 뭐 이 카페가 망했으니까 파티스리 샵 하나 차려야겠다. 못해요.
No.
No. No means no. Interesting. So you have to have like 전문들만 patisserie.
You have to go to school. Generally, you even start before you graduate high school.
진짜요?
Most master pastry chefs start from a very young age.
Wow.
Although now it's getting easier. It's easier and easier to start older. So this is where you'd find items like eclair, macaron, croquembouche, millefeuille. So like things that are like distinctly very sweet. Not as much flour-based things.
Oh, okay.
Because a French pâtissier generally works with what are called cold materials. So i.e. items that need to be refrigerated. Eggs, dairy, butter.
Sure.
Fruit. And if you think about in the past, when things that had to be kept fresh and refrigerated, that was a lot more difficult back in the day.
Oh, so it was only for the rich people.
Only for the rich and only for the qualified.
Aha. What about boulangerie?
Boulangerie, it's a bread shop where you would find like breads, like meal breads.
Okay.
So like baguettes, campagnas, like sourdough breads, like the big rustic loaves.
이것도 전문들만 하는 건가요?
No, so you don't have to be licensed to have a boulangerie or to call it a boulangerie.
Okay, that's
but
fun.
Yeah, generally it's less refined and dainty and more kind of rustic and hearty. And what you'd eat either for a meal or with a meal.
They probably still take it super seriously.
100%.
Yeah.
And if you're no good, they'll run you out of town.
Yeah, I bet. What about a viennoiserie? I've never heard of this one.
Where they sell products from Vienna, such as the croissant.
Ah, wait. Where's Vienna?
Austria.
It's Austria. That's
yes.
right. Ah, yeah, I think I've heard of that before.
Yeah, and so the croissant, and although there are some French people who will dispute this, most people seem to agree that it's from Austria, not France originally.
There you go. There's so many different types of croissants, too.
Yeah, and so they kind of sell the in-between stuff. Croissants, brioche, kind of the sweeter, flakier breads, but they're still breads, right?
Man, croissants, I've never knew how much like layering it takes to make a croissant.
Oh yeah.
I can pay 3,000원 for a croissant.
If you ever try making one yourself, you would pay any amount to let someone else do it.
It's true.
I've made them a bunch of times, and I never want to make them again. Every time I have to make them, I dread it.
Yeah, I bet. It just takes forever. Well, in any case, so much bread to talk about. We're just getting started here. But there is one particular place 빵을 만드는데 가장 중요한 재료를 최대 2년 동안 발효하여 전통 빵을 만드는 나라가 있다고 하는데요. 이 나라는 과연 어디일까요? Drumroll, please.
Ethiopia.
Oh, whoa! I did not even think about Ethiopia.
I don't. Yeah, I think most people wouldn't. That wouldn't be most people's first guess or third guess even, just because one, not a lot of people know a lot about Ethiopian food to begin with. But two, if you know a little bit about Ethiopian food, there is a type of bread there called injera.
Okay.
It's a kind of the spongy crepe sort of thing. But this is not it. This is a bread called kocho, made from enset, which kind of looks like a banana plant.
Okay.
They basically take the whole stem apart. It's pretty big. And they pulp it up, they bury it underground, and they ferment it for minimum 3 months, up to 2 years. They say the more you ferment it, the better it tastes.
그쵸.
Kind of almost like takes on like a cheese-like flavor.
Whoa.
So you cook it. You can have it fresh where it's kind of sticky like duck, or you can slice it thin, and then it becomes kind of, and dry it out, it becomes like a cracker. And then they'll use that with their right hand to pick up food and eat it.
Wow. Ethiopian food. 한 번도 언급하지 않았던 것 같은데요. I actually heard that there's an Ethiopian restaurant here in Seoul.
There are a couple, and all of them are very good.
Yeah. Well, maybe this weekend, if you don't have anything to eat, why not try some Ethiopian food? Well, in any case, since we are talking about bread, 빵왕 김탁구라는 드라마가 있었다고 하는데요. 거기서 나왔던 OST 들려드리겠습니다. Here's 이승철 그 사람.